Okay, shall we go ahead and get started then? Hello, everyone, and welcome to our continuing class on effective testing in RSpec 3. We're going to be taking a look today at Chapter 5, Testing and Isolation Unit Specs. So last time, just to give a quick kind of overview, we were looking at acceptance tests. And the way this works is that unit tests focus on an individual unit of code. An integration test wraps that to have multiple units of code working together. And an acceptance test is describing an entire flow like the user does X, Y should happen, and is the most expensive type of test and the least common. Unit tests, on the other hand, are the most common specs because they're going to be describing the behavior of each single one of your components of your application, how they should be behaving, and what exactly should be happening with those. So with that said, let's go ahead and switch back over to code and go from there. Okay, so we're back at our expense tracker API spec. Just as a brief review, we have a few slight differences. The first is that they were doing a lot of JSON.parse response body. So we now have let JSON in here with symbolized names true. The reason why we're doing that is so we can say something like, I expect the JSON to match an expense ID that happens to be an integer. So we can use pattern matching here. You might notice the 2 parentheses. That's because pattern matching will get confused otherwise. But it's very useful for testing, especially against these HTTP APIs and working with that. Sorry about that, I accidentally hit the mic. So let's see what else we did. We had a couple of expenses over here. We expected to be able to get that, and we expected the JSON to contain exactly coffee and Sue. Okay, so that gets us past there. Let's take a look into unit specs then. So in the last one, I'm not sure if I put this in the README or not. Nope, I didn't. Okay. So they had a little flow diagram, and we'll just recreate that again real quick. Put that up here. We start with an HTTP request, which is going to route to HTTP routing code, which will be a snot route. Which is going to go to our Ruby logic there, which is then going to go to SQL, which is our database adapter. And if there's a database adapter, then there's going to be a database to go along with that adapter. So acceptance tests, all of this at once. Unit spec, we're trying to test one of these layers in isolation. Like let's say this one right here. Well, not this one. That was a different box. This one specifically. Okay, there we go. So this chapter is going to be focusing on writing a complete set of unit specs for that HTTP layer. Let's see what we got here. Yep, so the book is going back over definitions of unit tests on the header from acceptance specs to unit specs. And it wants to get clear on definitions. And definitions are very useful because what I think something is and what you think something is may be different. And while that's well and good to have opinions on things, whenever you're in a code base, if people have too many different opinions on what should be a fundamental part of your application, like how do you test it and what does each type of test mean, you can imagine that leads to a little bit of discord. So we should probably have some unified definition on this. Okay, so let's see what exactly the book is saying. So the book says specifically, unit tests typically involve isolating class or method from the rest of the code. The result is a faster test and easier to find errors out of those. Now, where it differs is degree of isolation. So in the book, they're going for fastest and most isolated, and going off of Martin Fowler's definition there, which it links to in the book. Okay. So we won't be calling API classes directly. We'll be going through rack tests to simulate those. Okay. So for a better testing experience under here, they mention running RSpecs without any changes to Ruby core classes, which is the zero monkey patch mode. For those of you who don't know why they have that in there specifically, it's an artifact from the shoulda matchers, which would be something like, let's say it does something do, okay, fine, I'm in Markdown. There we go, now we have syntax highlighting. So in previous versions of RSpec, you would have something like this. I may be a little bit off because it's been a while since I've used these ones. So this would be the monkey patching version. And the one without that would be something more like that. The difference here is that we're not putting anything automatically onto any of these results or any core Ruby classes. And if you ever happen to have a collision where RSpec wants something to be named something and you want something to be named something, you can imagine that does some bad things. Anyway. It also mentions using the documentation format on there. So if you don't remember that, that was format documentation, or I think it was -FD. I'd have to look again. Personally, I like this because it actually explains what I'm doing on there. Okay. And then the third thing is run your specs in random order. So why random order? Well, one of the things which makes it very easy to miss that your tests are mutating or doing something strange, which could lead to flakiness in your actual application, is if they all run in the same order, it's very easy to potentially hide something which is a cascading side effect. And if that happens, good luck tracing it down. A lot of randomness in tests will actually expose flakes or non-deterministic behavior or other things you might not expect and will be very annoying to debug later in your code. So I definitely suggest keeping random order on that. Okay. So they go through a few more configuration settings. We will leave that out for now. Okay, expense tracker, spec unit. Okay, let's make those real quick. Okay. So that should be spec, unit. I wonder if it'll let me do this in line. Yes, it does let me do multiple folders. Thank you, VS Code. Okay, API spec RB. Require relative, and I'm going to miss one of these dot dots. Okay, so let's frame that out as they have that in there. You know, actually, I'm becoming fond of this wrapping idea. Because let's say you're doing something inside here like my test class, that's no longer global. That's going to be the module you're testing. Ah, yes. RubyCop will warn you on some of the shoulda syntax there. Let's see here. So we have that. And anytime during this, feel free to ask questions, make comments, or anything else like that. Let's see here. So RSpec describe API. Post expenses, don't need that. When the expense is successfully recorded. Got that. So the book only uses one line it's, but because I have a bunch of autocorrect syntax, well, snippets in here, I'm just going to do this instead. Okay, and the rest of the content will go in there. Okay, so we have that context, we have that context. When the expense fails validation. So as a general rule with RSpec, if you happen to be testing something, always test both the positive and the negative case. If you only test the positive case, well, how do you know it's working if you can't prove that it also fails whenever it gets something that you're not supposed to give it? Or rather, something that is expected that should fail it. And that's the problem sometimes is I've seen a lot of unit tests which say 100% coverage, we're great, but they don't test a negation case and then end up missing an entire branch of behavior there. Anyway, let's just copy these. Okay, so we got both of those. And let's make sure this works real quick. Grab that. B, I think it's not breaking. What did I break there? Oh, right. Okay, well, that's fine. Well, anyway. I guess reverse tautology is in. Expect false to equal true. Now all of our pending specs should magically, there we go. Okay. Elegant? No. Works? Yes. Congratulations, welcome to Western Programming. Okay, let's see what we got here. Time to fill in the behavior. Okay. So expense tracker, API snippets. Let's see here. App. What exactly is it going for here? Filling in the first spec. Don't have any classes to indicate that, so it's wanting expense tracker, API snippets. Does it want it in the base directory there? Okay. Well, I guess we can do that. So let's go over those real quick. Class API. Okay, so we have that. Okay, and for flexibility's sake, it wants us to do injection here. That said, that's going to subtly change namespace. Probably not an issue for now, but something for later. So this idea is called dependency injection, which is the ledger that this API class is going to be using gets passed in from the outside. So it could be this, or it could be something like, say, some double in one of the tests that allows you to do whatever you want with it. Okay. So leave that alone for now. Let's see here. Okay, so book goes over a few advantages of that. Having explicit dependencies, which are documented in line with the signature of the method. Code that's easier to reason about because there's no global state. Libraries are easier to drop into another project, and more testable code. Let's see here. Disadvantage is that the callers always have to pass that object. Let's see here. Right. I was actually thinking about this whenever who's calling this code is why not just put the default ledger right here in the initializer? And the book does recommend that right afterwards. Okay. Let's see here. So they have. What exactly are they going for here? Okay, so the book mentions in some, we'll just call it some method for now, you might have a bunch of code actually relying on the ledger. With some data. We'll just call it usage for now for the sake of it. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, then the book ends up going into test doubles. Could be called mock stubs, fakes, spies, depending on how they're used. Chapter 13 goes into more detail. Let's see here. There's instance double and double. Since we'll need access to a ledger, we'll have to do something here. So let's go over to the API spec over for unit again. Okay. New struct. Expense ID. Okay, so add a few things in here. Require rack tests. Okay, so we got that. Include rack test methods. Okay. Ledger equals this. And then an instance double of expense tracker ledger. Okay. let's see what else we have over here. So as with acceptance test, we'll be using rack test to route HTTP request to HTTP class, and then have that eventually return a record result. Let's see here. So now we're going to focus on the ledger. Okay, so the book has a call aside section of use value objects at layer boundaries, which is saying layers are where integration bugs hide. Using simple value objects like record, result, or struct makes it easier to isolate code and trust your tests. I'd be inclined to agree. It references a Gary Bernhardt talk on that. But for the most part, keep all the complexity inside of all these interfaces and keep the external edge as simple as possible. That way you don't have to deal with it. Your users should not need to know what a class is doing inside as much as it should just know what it needs to know to get its job done. Such as you shouldn't have to process if one of these request specs does a bunch of validations and go through and manually decide yourself whether or not that's successful or a failure. That should be the job of the response, because the response should know if it was good or bad. You shouldn't have to figure it out. You shouldn't have to, say, manually check the result codes whenever it could offer methods like success, failure, other things like that. Oh, some hot coffee. Okay, note to let coffee cool down next time. Anyway, let's get back to this. So it returns expense ID. What do we got? Okay, so let's hack this out of here real quick. Expense is equal to some data. Got it. True, 417, and nil. So tell me real quick, if I were to point at this record result, would you know what in the world these things meant unless you went back up to the definition? Probably not. So what we're going to do is keyword init. That way we can say, and I'm going to bring these with me because I cannot even remember it myself. Okay, so that is a little bit clearer to me on what exactly is going on here. Now, there are a few little caveats with things like this. If you haven't seen it before, what we're doing is we're saying we're allowing Ledger to receive this method with this as its argument, and it's going to return back this record result. There are a few different things in here, and the book is probably going to go into this in a second, but let's just go over it ourselves first. So what we're doing is we're saying this instance double over here, we're allowing it to get this method. If we don't allow it, then it's going to say instance double received a method that it didn't expect. That's why I like instance doubles, because if something gets called on it that you're not expecting, well, that's probably a sign that you need to isolate a little bit further. So instance doubles are very useful to try and isolate out which behavior is still calling through. With is saying, no, specifically with these arguments. If it's not these arguments, that's not going to count. But here's the kicker, is the and return. If you leave this off, this is going to return nil. So that's bitten me more than a few times. So do be careful of that. It is a little bit pesky. But this is very useful for describing what your external sources should be doing during this. Okay. So let's see what we got here. Did we put an expectation in there? Ah, right. They did add that. Okay, so I'm going to add that right there. I must miss that part. JSON generate expense. Okay, so we have that, and that should fail. Oh, right. Now, if I'm going to do that, where did that other spec go? I mean, honestly, I probably should generalize this and put it somewhere else, but for now, it's just going to go up here. You get to live right about here. Okay. Okay, so there we go. Yep, that is one of the problems with the pattern matching interface there. So instead of that, let's go back to saying equal 417. Run it again, it should still be failing, but it's going to tell us that it expected 42. Well, it expected 417 and got 42. Okay. So let's see here. What do we have? So it goes through that failure and going to the implementation. Okay. So let's go to expense tracker app API. There we go. So we have post expenses. Oh, right. That's where the 42 came from. You know, I was starting to wonder that. So let's comment that out for now. Okay, so we have that. So let's take this out. Try that again. Ooh, that went boom in a fun place. Okay. So where exactly does it want the API snippets to go then? That's weird. Well, okay. It can go over here. Let's see here. So we had API snippets there. Expected one got that. And that is on line 6. Sinatra base, given one expected 0. Fine. Okay, let's see what that spec was again. API.new ledger, yes. Just for sake of it, let's see what this is. Okay. API new ledger. API spec 11 in app. Yeah. I don't have any caching, so it shouldn't matter. Okay, that's better. Well, at least gives me something. Why the heck does it care about that other thing? Let's put that in there. Let's put that in there. Take that there and see what we got real quick. Yeah, that's what I was worried about. Did I skip something on here? Yeah, I have to have skipped something. Where is that? Yeah, because they want the entire implementation of that for that to even work in the first place, so weird. Okay, well, I guess we're going to implement it anyway. Okay, so ledger is going to need what? A record method. Well, let's just give it a record method. We can worry about all the other implementation later. Expected 0 got 1. Give him 1 expected 0. Okay, so we're back to this failure. App API initialize ledger, yes. Actually, let's try this. Puts ledger. That times 50. That times 50. This is a good way to put some giant thing right in the middle of the spec. That way I can see it. Puts debugging is not dead, y'all. Okay. Let's see what exactly we got in here. So it does, in fact, get into here. And it does get into there. And super is probably coming from Sinatra base, which is mad at us. Let's see here. Is there an update on Sinatra from what exactly they were doing? Let's see here. I did lock that down, didn't I? 210. Okay, well, let's go spelunking a little bit. That sounds like fun. What's this doing? New bang with that. Okay. Gotcha. So that shouldn't matter. Well, we know the ledger's there. Actually, let's take this off real quick. Don't need that. Ooh, so API for some reason is not calling into there, and it expects there to be that, but there's not. Curiouser and curiouser. Oh, let's go back here. API Sinatra base, initialize ledger that. Where's the initialization from Sinatra? Okay. So that all looks good. Yeah, something changed in versions here. Can't beat them, binding up pry them. Okay. Let's see what this gives us then. Okay, gemstone pry. So we got that. Fine, into the gem file it goes. Get that, get that. Run that, and yeah, there has to be something different with Sinatra 210. I should probably just downgrade to Ruby 2.7 instead of trying this, but we're having fun, so. Okay, so we got that. So it's hitting the expense tracker API, which inherits from Sinatra base. Did I misspell initialize? Initialize, no? No, I don't think I did. Okay, so it's not getting that. Curiouser and curiouser. So that's definitely not the same signature there. Let's see here. What was that arg names thing that was in there? I think it was parameters. So it's arrest. So yeah, I must have misspelled initialize. I'm literally going to copy initialize from the book. I'm going to set it right above here. Initialize. Yeah. Man, that's tripping me out. Expense tracker API. 'Cause, 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 'cause this some sort of scoping issue? No. Yeah, so it's getting that from Sinatra bass. It's definitely getting those. So why in the world is that complaining like that? Hmm. Well, it looks like we're going to be doing a little bit of debugging here. Or we're going to be lazy, say RVM use 2.7. 273. Okay, let's downgrade Sinatra because something is doing something weird. Okay. We will head backwards, and I am going to downgrade all of those gems to see what we got here. Okay, part 1, getting started with RSpec. RSpec's running them. RSpec way was more philosophical. Let's see here, RSpec's output. Let's see what all we got here. Yeah. See, it works there. Gosh, that's going to bug me for a while. I'm going to figure that out later and see what exactly breaks with Ruby 3 because that is trippy. I call shenanigans. That's not fair. Okay. So we got that working. 4 examples, 1 success, and this is why you follow along directly with what books have on versions, unless you want to go on debugging missions. Okay. Let's go back to where we were. Building an app with RSpec. Isolated unit test. Okay. Okay, let's see here. Now, where are we at? Handling success. Okay, so we have the ledger, we have that one passing, and we want response with 200. Okay, got it. Now we can do this. Well, that was exciting. Put that in there. Put this in here. And they mentioned the refactoring thing in the next section, but we'll leave it alone for now. What am I doing? Let's just copy this. Okay, so we got that. We can run the spec again, see what happens. That is an immediate success. the book mentions making sure that something might fail. So if we were to go over here and say status 404, run that again, then it would fail. Yeah, always make sure that you can break your test and always make sure you're testing the opposite cases. Okay. So next chapter is going to mention refactoring, which is essentially pull a lot of this stuff into a before block. Let's see here. Let expense. Yoink. Don't need you anymore. Do need you. Okay. Okay, so the book only mentions doing the allow inside there. Do we still want that, or do we want the request in there as well? Let's leave it for what the book says. Save that, take that, grab these, and take that out. Make sure that it's still working. Yep, 2 for 2. Okay, so the book does mention, it says that if we happen to put post in before, it'll interfere with some of the other future specs and make it a little bit harder to work with. Okay, so handling failure. Let's take a look at this. Let's grab this. So we don't need the success anymore. Let's see what we got here. Success false. Error message is going to be fencing complete. Oopsie, took that out with me. Is that one ever indented up here? Yep, it is. Okay. So it goes down one layer. Okay. Got that. Now let's take a look at the actual implementation. For 22, so we have both of those. Let's see if that works. Okay, so those will fail because we have not actually implemented the failure behavior. Okay, so we'll go over to the API. Result success. Else. Okay, so that works. Then we'll have to go over into this. Oops, that is not that. So we got that. That shouldn't change anything. Did change things. Okay, what do we got here? Oh, right. Record expense, got that, got that. If we're going to do this in the API spec, we can take this out too, I think. Yep. Okay. So we'll go ahead and leave that there. I think that covers all of the main subjects out of this one. I'm going to have to look into what happened with Ruby 3. I'm betting it's something with keyword arguments or something else there, and how that behaves with Sinatra. And, well, anyway, that'll be a fun little adventure. If you want extra credit, try and find out how in the world that works. But in the meantime, go with what versions the book says, if at all possible. Well, I think that is all we have for today on this class. If anyone has any questions, we can answer those. If not, we can go ahead and leave it there. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and call that. Go ahead and have a great day, everyone.